And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast from Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk at Spartan Stadium. Holy crap, Paul, Michigan State beat Iowa 32-20. Iowa was pretty good, not great. But Michigan State was tough today in a lot of ways. Been wondering, whether Michigan State was capable of something like this year. I heard from good authority that Michigan State's coaches they're always optimistic, but they really thought they had something here. I needed to see it to believe it. Coming out of the bye week, there's a chance they could look different, but I still needed to see it. Hadn't seen the running game really produce all season for them to come out and do this against a good Iowa defensive front. Good Iowa defense. Statistically not great, not as good as it was supposed to be. But Michigan State landed punches early and just kept flurrying, and it just makes the rest of the season look different. Opens up all kinds of possibilities. Great win, great demonstration by Michigan State today. I'm impressed. I thought it was possible, but I certainly didn't expect it. But they came out and did it. And Michigan State football, the whole Michigan State football universe looks a lot different today, and it could look even more different 7 days from now. Paul, what's going on here?
Two things that really stood out to me. You talk about that they probably could have won. They can't win unless they run the football.
Yes.
So I think the one thing you can talk about Iowa is, regardless of whether Iowa was as good on defense or not as they were last year, I kind of think that Iowa team that Michigan State lost to in Iowa City last year was better than this one. Of course, you're not going to hear that because they've got a new offensive coordinator and they don't have someone to complain about as much in Tim Lester. But I'll tell you this, I asked Tom Kakert, our friend from Hawkeye Report, before the game, which first-year quarterback he can remember going in and playing Iowa for the very first time, a rookie quarterback who's never played them, going in and beating them. And that's different than getting a guy that's been in the transfer portal, has played 4 years at Oklahoma or something like that, or Kansas State or wherever, and then coming in and beating Iowa. I'm talking about someone that has never played a lot of college football. And Aiden Childs only had 6 games as a starter under his belt before this game. But to come in and play within himself and to beat Iowa, he did a great job tonight. But he doesn't do that if he doesn't have the run game, and that's where all of it started. So we talk about the things that we think could happen. I didn't think it was possible for Michigan State to beat Iowa like this unless the defense was to have some defensive scores, that the Iowa offense really would help them out. And we saw, a little bit of that last year in Iowa City. Iowa's offense was really completely inept. Michigan State's defense was a little bit opportunistic. But the way that Michigan State won this game, dominating physically on both sides of the football at the point of attack, I didn't necessarily see that coming. And Aiden Childs, he played as well within himself as any quarterback that I can remember covering making their first start against Iowa. And this is a huge test for him because of his weaknesses actually line up with Iowa's strengths. He has a tendency to try to do too much. Yeah. He has a tendency to try to fit the ball into maybe areas he shouldn't. He has occasionally poor footwork in the pocket, which leads to overthrows. And you would think against a team like this that would lead to an interception-prone evening. Well, he didn't have to make a ton of throws in this. He didn't have to do it all on his shoulders. And I felt like this is the first game this year where teams were actually falling for some of the play-action stuff because the run game was working. And there were several times when I was watching the run game where I was falling for some of the things where I thought where the run was going to hit, and where it did hit were two different places. I think Michigan State did a great job in terms of a run game execution. I thought the tailbacks did a nice job tonight. When there wasn't space there, guys, made their own way. But this is the best blocked game that I've seen this year, and it really showed you what Aiden Childs can do right now as a quarterback when he doesn't have to have the weight of the entire team on his shoulders. And this is the first game where I felt like he didn't feel like he had to carry the offense for significant stretches of the game. And that's you don't want a first-year quarterback having the whole offense on his shoulders. No. And he didn't have to do that tonight, and he played within himself, and Michigan State played a great game in all 3 phases. Yeah. It wasn't perfect, but everybody came to play tonight.
Really interesting, noteworthy game for Michigan State. Childs, he threw that one interception in the first half, forced it. There's cover 3, and they lock you up in the traffic in the intermediate areas. Guy wasn't open. Usually, that was something maybe he would do earlier in the year. He's doing it less frequently now. Second possession of the game, had an interception dropped. But after that, never really threw it into danger. And you could see him like the last drive of the first half when Michigan State drove and missed the 55-yard field goal that they missed. Michigan State had played a good first half, 12-0, had the ball back. but don't make a mistake right now against Iowa, who notoriously is great at causing turnovers. You guys all know that. So it was a drive situation, but you could almost see him thinking and carrying out what he's been told by his coaches. No turnover, take care of the ball all season, but in prep for Iowa for sure. In this drive, for sure, do not turn it over. Don't give him a pick six right before half, something like that. You could just see a more experienced level of discretion when he was making choices and throwing in completions that last drive of the first half. Ended up running the ball and getting in position for a 55-yard field goal, which they missed, but not taking the chances. We remember early in the year when he was just, he was a riverboat gambler, right, which understandable as young as he was and so forth. He has pulled back the reins on those. So today, 22 of 30, 256 yards. Efficient, rushed for 50 yards. He was a weapon. He was a plus. Michigan State had a big advantage of the quarterback position today over Cade McNamara. And Aiden Child deserves it. He should feel good about this, and I'm sure he does.
Yeah, he did a nice job on some of those cover two window type passes.
Oh, man.
That you have to do against Iowa. He did a nice job of, throwing to his guy and accurately in the middle of the field, which you have to do. I just think this was a really good game for him. And you can look back at earlier in the season where Michigan State really kind of had a chance against Maryland. You look at what they had a chance going into halftime and then coming out of halftime. In each of those instances, he was kind of mistake prone on that. And I think it does help when you have a run game that's working. You have a defense. You have a defense that basically shuts them down, doesn't allow a first down in the first quarter. So it wasn't like he felt it's not like he felt like that he had to do something, before half. You got confidence in your defense. But the thing I liked about him in the second half, when he did have to do something, every time that Iowa had a score, Childs, to his credit, he engineered scoring drives in response, and that's, as good as the offense played in the first half. I felt like as good as the defense played in the first half, the Michigan State defense, I felt like the offense played in the second half. They had answer scores, which are just so big in this game, and you look at after Caleb Johnson cuts loose for that 75-yarder, Michigan State responds with a 9-play 75-yard drive, and he looked a lot more mature. He didn't get sped up the way most quarterbacks do against Iowa, and I felt like Michigan State's skill players, really put Iowa at times in some tough positions. There's a lot of holding, grabbing. There could have been a lot more flags thrown tonight, and now that Michigan State's back to playing teams in their peer group, Ohio State and Oregon are not Michigan State's peer group. But now they're back to playing teams like Iowa, like a Maryland, maybe next week against Michigan. You look at some of the other teams on your schedule, like a Rutgers. Michigan State's skill advantage with that receiving core, Nick Marsh, Montori Foster, Jerron Glover. You got tight end and Jack Velling. That stuff is starting to show through. And
Illinois
and Michigan State can make hay against these kind of guys. What you want to judge this team by is how you do against teams in your own peer group. We saw them drop one that they should have won at Boston College. That was disappointment. But you look at the two teams that Michigan State's played in Big Ten play in their peer group, Maryland and Iowa, those are wins for Michigan State. So to me, these are the games that you have to win, and Michigan State put itself in a great position to perhaps become bowl eligible down the road by winning this game. Without this win against Iowa, you're putting yourself under a lot of pressure because you look at the teams left on the schedule. Indiana, that's going to be an uphill game, and I would say they'd be heavily favored against Michigan State. At the beginning of the year, maybe not so much. Purdue obviously is. Michigan State has a pretty good chance of beating those guys. We don't know about Michigan next week. Are they going to have a bounce back game? Are they going to be as bad as they were today? But Michigan State, by winning this game against Iowa, they kind of reclaim that loss they had at Boston College, in my opinion. Now they're back on schedule. Now they're right where they need to be to get in that 6 to 7 win range, and that's critical for Michigan State in the first year under Jonathan Smith, and it's critical for player development, for everyone being on the same page. It's critical coming out of a bye week and just getting that momentum back. And now you can look in the back and say, hey, listen, we played the two best teams in the conference. Yeah. We played, we got it handed to us, but we did some good things in those games that we can build on, and it really showed in this game. I think Michigan State, this is the best I can see them looking coming out of a bye week in a long time. Yeah. And the physicality piece, them matching up, not only matching, but exceeding Iowa in the physicality department on both sides of the football. That's why, if I'm a Michigan State fan, I'm excited because it ain't easy to beat Iowa physically. No. Iowa doesn't get beat physically, and this is a great litmus test for Michigan State, and it's something that's going to serve notice around the Big Ten that, hey, these guys are in the right direction under Jonathan Smith.
We were watching the replay, and there's a couple plays I showed you where Tanner Miller was taking 94, 95, two quality defensive tackles for Iowa and getting under them and moving them 2 yards off the line of scrimmage a couple times. And then on defense, there was a short yardage stoppage when Daquan Dowse got into the center, pushed him back 2 yards. And, Chris Bogle, setting the edge, and they get a tackle for loss on a 3rd and short against Iowa. Now, Michigan State deserves it, and they looked good, and they needed to, and they never lost confidence. When we talked to players this week, when they played Oregon and Ohio State, they were talking about, there's just a few plays here and there. We know we can play against those guys. I don't know if that's true. Maybe the Ohio State game to a point, but they really believed it as athletes that they were close. And after the Oregon game, I wasn't so sure. However, after that game, some coaches and players made mention of things that you and I talk about a lot as to when you play a team and when you are a tired team. That Oregon game made me pause a little bit because Michigan State really was beaten at the line of scrimmage. But Michigan State was playing 6 straight weeks after 5 weeks of training camp. Everybody has 5 weeks of training camp, but not many teams go 5 weeks, then 6 straight games. Oregon certainly had a bye week 2 or 3 weeks before that. Ohio State had a bye week 2 or 3 weeks before that. It comes at a nice time. Michigan State hadn't had that. They had just played Ohio State and slugged it out really effectively despite the score against Ohio State, and then travel all the way across the country when you haven't had a bye week. You just played Ohio State. And Michigan State was in pick-your-poison mode against Oregon. They didn't want to give up any big plays. So 2 deep safeties. Linebackers did not flow fast. And Oregon was getting chunk plays on the ground, but they never got the long run. They're getting chunks, and they're beating them at the line of scrimmage. And it looked bad, but it was still 7-0 late in the second quarter. Michigan State got turnovers in the end zone twice. So that plan was working. But the thing that messed with me was, what happened to Michigan State's run defense? I mean, now they're playing Iowa. But the bye week, that was always the asterisk. Maybe coming out of the bye week, they can look different. Meanwhile, Iowa looked great against Washington, who a week before had to rush the field and they beat Michigan. But Washington rushes the field, beats Michigan, emotional game. Then they come the length of the country to travel to Iowa and play at 9 in the morning, and they lay an egg. So when you play a team, where you play a team, you and I talk about this a lot. A lot of people tell us, you're crazy, it doesn't mean that much. It means a lot, and it helped Michigan State today, and might have hurt Iowa a little bit, I don't know, but Michigan State, line of scrimmage, we haven't seen that all year, establishing that run, stopping an excellent running back. Wow.
One of the things I want to point out, too, about the Oregon game is Michigan State played that game on a Friday night. So you're playing late on a Saturday night the previous week. Even though it's at home, you're playing Ohio State. So I really felt like we see this with Tom Izzo once in a while. I really felt like that Oregon game was kind of like that Notre Dame game that Michigan State played in basketball 2 years ago, where they were running hot, they were doing really some really good things. They're top 25, and then they go after traveling all that game all the time. And they're playing guys too many minutes, and they go to Notre Dame, and everyone expects Michigan State to roll Notre Dame, and it's just like one of those deals where
short rest,
and Michigan State was out of it. And Notre Dame was up for that game, and they got trucked, and it was like one of those fatigue games. I feel like because of all the late games, and there's a late game tonight, I get that, but I feel like because of the travel, because of all the late games, because of who they played, there's been a lot more time management. Like when you play a team like Oregon and you play them on that short of time, you're trying to rest and recover. You're trying to do those type of things. So it's different when you play Oregon after Ohio State, and you're trying to get your body right, but you're also trying to get ready for that kind of challenge. You've got a bye week. What's the one thing they did during the bye week besides rest and recover? They went physical on physical.
For one day,
which
was interesting.
But it was a tone setter, and it was something that was like, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what we've got to get back to. And then these practices this week and the lead up to this, knowing that they're going to play Iowa, were ultra physical, but they didn't have to take periods off. They could go. They could go hard. They could, in preparation for Iowa because people's bodies were right, and they played like it today. And it's just like one of those deals where, we've seen it in Michigan State. To use basketball as another example, we've seen teams come into Michigan State thinking that they got to be the best rebounding, the toughest team ever to match the physicality that Michigan State is known for in basketball, and at times they out-physical Michigan State. And I felt like Michigan State cycled up and was like, this is a chance to prove this is who we are. This is what our identity is. We played 2 of the top 5 teams in the country, but this is who we are. And I think you saw what we've seen on Michigan State defense against teams in their peer group. They're physical, they're tough, they're hard to run on. They're resilient in a lot of ways, and they make it difficult. But on offense, this is the first time that you've seen Michigan State show we're physical on offense. We can beat you up. We can win at the point of attack. We saw a lot of 3rd down and 3 runs in this. We saw them have enough confidence to put 2 true freshman running backs and give them in-game reps in a game where they didn't punt one time. And, so those are the kind of things that we've seen in defense. We've seen the physicality. We've seen the toughness, the resilience. Today we saw it on offense. And to see them close a game out and having 2 touchdown drives in the second half, that's psychologically uplifting for this offense. Yes, the defense gave up some touchdowns. This offense needed to do that in the second half because their offense has done some good things early in the game, but they have a real hard time coming out in the second half once teams try to make adjustments. In this game, Michigan State was better on offense in the second half, moved the ball, finished drives, and they played with the kind of physicality that Jonathan Smith wants from his offense.
Yeah, all that stuff. And stopping the run today, different because you don't have to honor Iowa's passing attack. So bringing safety down in a little bit more to play the run. Also, the linebackers, the one-gapping scheme, we're just seeing it, reading it, and shooting gaps quickly. Against Oregon, they weren't doing that by choice. So you saw Halliday get in there and make some stops. It's just different when the other team is already one-dimensional, which is going to be the case against Michigan. Will it be the case against Illinois? Maybe. Rutgers? Maybe, probably. So Michigan State's defense against those type of teams, it's different than when you're playing Ohio State and Oregon. Newsflash.
Yeah, but the thing that I was impressed with today is, you look at the physicality piece. We talk about the defensive line, offensive line, winning at the point of attack. The thing against Iowa that makes it tough is when you get those short passes to big physical running backs like Caleb Johnson or to tight ends. And I felt like the one thing that you really know you've got a physical defense is when corners are coming up and chopping down big physical players that usually don't come down in first contact. Caleb Johnson's a dude that's gotten so many yards after contact.
Yes.
He reminds me of kind of Le'Veon Bell from that aspect of when he was here. He led the country in yards after contact. Javon Ringer was another guy that did that, Jehu Kalkrick back in the day. But to see a dude that's 175 on a good day like Chuck Brantley come up hard and chop that guy down low, and to see Ed Woods do that, and to see those defensive backs play physical pass defense against tight ends, and Iowa's always got great tight ends and they're physical and they do it the right way, but to see that added something a little extra. So
I don't remember many missed tackles. Do you?
No.
I mean, they're like you said, he's one of the best at breaking tackles. PFF has a stat on that. He's like top 2 or 3 in the country at yards after contact.
I saw a couple times where Michigan State kind of, didn't quite set the edge, or a running back or a receiver got 3 on a short route because someone wasn't quite in the right place. But we didn't see missed tackles in this game, and I felt like then there wasn't too many in-space tackles. I talked about the Chuck Brantley one, but they talk about population to the football. Michigan State was all over it today, and kudos to them. And they rotated a lot of guys in there, and that's kind of the most impressive thing to me.
Amazing. Now, hey, we got big coverage coming up this week. Michigan State's playing at Michigan this week. All kinds of coverage at SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. Go to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. I'd love to have you over there. Also, give us a like here on this channel. Subscribe to this channel. We'd really appreciate that. Also want to say just a few years ago, the state of Michigan ranked first in the nation for deposit container recycling. 90% of all purchased bottles and cans were being redeemed for their deposits. Today, only 73% are being redeemed. That means Michiganders are forfeiting $105 million every year in bottle and can deposits that are not being redeemed. This deficit is having a negative impact on our environment. When Michigan's recycling rate drops, it hurts the environment, it hurts industry, and it hurts all of us. Help the environment, help your state, help yourself. Take them back. They're your lakes, your roads, and your beaches, and it's your dime. So take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back. A message from Schupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. So Michigan State versus Michigan coverage coming up all week. It's going to be a big one in Ann Arbor coming up next week. That's the thing about college football. The things we talk about in June, July, we think we know what we're talking about, but we don't, especially in this era of the transfer portal, people thought Florida State was a top 10 team. No one knew Vanderbilt was going to be this good. No one knew Indiana was going to be this good. You look at the two teams that played for the national championship game last year, Michigan and Washington, how they've come down. I realize they lost their coaches and a lot of players, but in the past, if you play for a national championship one year, you don't expect to fall like that. Alabama, look at them. They've lost 2 games. And then Army-Navy's good. BYU's good. Iowa State's good. Stuff is like this. And now within this season, Michigan State has been around 500 here lately. Can they make a push? Montori Foster and the players talk about during the bye week, they set a goal to go 6-0 in the second half of the season. Coming into the year, we looked at the gauntlet. Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, Michigan, probably going to lose all 4, everybody thought. Michigan State's a good chance to go 2-2 in those games. And if they do beat Michigan, Indiana's going to be tough. Illinois is going to be a challenge. But you play like this, and it's going to be hard to play like this every week because they were so fresh and so driven. But if they play like this, they can win these 6.
Yeah, I think the thing that sticks with me is, well, first off, on defense, you talk about how hard and physical they played.
By the way, there's another bye week coming up.
Right.
Go ahead.
They rotated a ton of guys, so it's not like there was like one guy out there. It's not like they played a ton of guys tonight. The thing that really kind of impressed me that I think you can maybe hang your hat on is Michigan State got significantly better on the offensive line. That was the biggest question mark to me. To me, that's what governed the ceiling of this team. Like Aiden Childs, we know he's going to be up and down because he's a first-year starter. But if you have an offensive line that played as physically well as they did tonight, they played better than we've seen them play together in terms of like cohesiveness as a unit. And I'm talking about tight ends too as well in the whole operation. Actually, the run game operation all together with wide receivers blocking, it was outstanding tonight. I didn't know that they were capable of this, but once you put it on film and you get some confidence and you can kind of start growing, we saw this is the best the offensive line has looked. Can they continue to build on this? I think they can because I think confidence is a big part of it. And you see, I thought Brandon Baldwin, as a guard, played his best game today.
He was looking better. Then he had those 2 mistakes.
Yeah, he
in the
did.
red zone the one time.
He did, and other guys made mistakes too. I mean, Ashton Lepo got flagged for that one hold. I didn't know if that was, I thought it was
Stanton Ramil, wasn't it?
Or yeah, Stanton Ramil 65.
And that led to the biggest play of the game.
Right, and I didn't think that was necessarily, I didn't think necessarily that should have been a flag necessarily. I didn't think that was terrible, but these guys, they need, they've been feeling like they're close, and now this is something they can draw confidence from. I think it's really kind of can propel them forward. And I felt like those running backs today, they did a nice job of either hitting it as hard as they could when they needed to or being patient. And I just felt like the plays hit where they were supposed to go. I thought there's more consistency from that regard. I felt like there's a lot of confidence from guys. I felt like people finished runs, whether it's Nate Carter or K-Ron Lynch Adams, all those guys, and I felt like this is some of the best route running in terms of that underneath stuff that you have to have against Iowa. I thought the routes were really good. There's a couple of those like 20-yard gains or whatever. I'm like, man, Nick Marsh ran a great route on this, or Montori Foster ran a great route on this. And I think we talked about a couple of the inaccurate passes that Aiden Childs had, but dang, I had to feel good for Montori Foster. He had 100 yards receiving today, and he deserved it because there's been several games in which he should have had 100 yards receiving, didn't. But, I mean, you talk about when's the last time 2 players, Michigan State players, had 100 yards receiving. Probably back, I'm guessing, Jaden Reed and Jalen Naylor, if those 2 guys got it. But to do that against Iowa is pretty dang impressive. Yeah. And I think that the offense can build on this, and I think the confidence is going to be there. And I also liked what Aiden Childs did in terms of his feel for running the football. I think he showed some really good running back instincts with the stop and the starts, the cutting. I think he's starting to feel that out better. I think he's starting to get a feel for when he should, on some of those reads, whether he should keep it or whether he should give it to the tailback. And we saw a lot of growth from him today.
He rushed, I think, 11 times for 50-plus yards. Yeah, his decisions on when to pull, and that's going to put more pressure on defensive teams, opponents that play Michigan State. You have to honor that quarterback run, too, and it's going to make all of it better. You're talking about that whole Stanton Ramil. Iowa had just cut it to 25-20 on that 75-yarder, and things were getting a little bit tight. And I wrote about it in the rehash and analysis that was, in my opinion, the turning point play. After the hold, like Michigan State gains a yard at 2nd and 19, from like the 40-yard line, maybe midfield or so. And, probably not going to pick up this first down. Probably going to give it back to Iowa down 5, past the midway point of the fourth quarter. 2nd and 19. And Iowa, they play a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 4. Back in the Norman Parker days, they played a lot of cover 2, but I didn't detect much cover 2 tonight. But on that play, they played it. And Michigan State's receivers, ran a high-low smash concept. And the cover 2 hole, Nick Marsh on an out route at about 20 yards, gain of about 25 or so on 2nd and 19. It's one thing for him to throw accurately and Marsh to run a good route there, but you got a freshman recognizing it, making a read, and going to the right, running the correct route, and Childs putting it on the money. I asked Jonathan Smith about Childs and his decision-making and avoiding the big mistakes against a team that forces a lot of mistakes, and he brought up that play, that 2nd and 19, into the cover 2 hole. I thought that was the turning point of the whole game. After that, they pick it up. A couple plays later, they get to a 3rd and 3. A 3rd and 3. They run that toss sweep, gain about 6-7 yards, pick up 3rd and 3, crucial. Then they throw it to Marsh down to the 1-yard line, and Carter scores touchdown. Now they're up by 2 scores again. But that 2nd and 19, the read against the defense they hadn't seen all night, but they had prepared for it because it's Iowa. The route that was run, the accuracy, the read, the pass protection, that was a turning point. Young players making it happen. And that skill rising to the top, too, that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think, if it wasn't for Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, Nick Marsh would be like one of the biggest stories in the Big Ten as far as a young receiver. He doesn't play young. I'll tell you what, we've seen a lot of good receivers come in here, guys that are freshmen and end up going on to big things. I'm thinking of guys like in the past, like a Donnie Corley when he came in, making mistakes on his routes. Nick Marsh runs good, mature routes. He's not like a guy that is just raw, you're throwing him out there. He runs, routes like you'd expect a junior or senior to run, in terms of varying his speeds. He does so many good things right, and the fact that he can play multiple positions. And Michigan State is a good receiving corps, but the fact that to see these guys running good routes in critical times, that's a big deal moving forward. And I really feel like for a guy like Nick Marsh, who had a really good first half of the season, first few games, got hurt, kind of came back. This bye week is a chance for him to reset mentally. And he's just a good dude. You can hear like some of the questions he answered tonight. He's just like mindful, humble, hardworking kind of guy, and that's the kind of guy you want to help you move your program forward. And he's going to do it in a big way. But having Jerron Glover available, Montori Foster, and then I thought the tight ends, Jack Vellen did a nice job tonight as well.
Did we mention Jonathan Kim yet? School record 6 field goals at the 55-yarder. Each of those field goals in the second half, each one was more important than the one before, and he just kept hitting them. And just amazing performance for him. Also things not to overlook. Michigan State was up 12-7. Iowa came out to begin the second half, touchdown drive. It's 12-7. Michigan State had dominated the first half. I think first downs in the first half were 15-2.
Yeah.
Dominating, kicking field goals. They wouldn't have kicked all field goals if they'd have called pass interference in the end zone on that. Would have been first goal at 2-yard line. I think Michigan State probably scores a touchdown there. So you talk about red zone failures. That's I don't want to complain about the field being crowned and so forth, and complain about the officiating. But if the officials do their job and make a good call there, it's first and goal at the 2. And I think Michigan State's quote unquote red zone problems in the first half are it's not a problem. You end up with 16 points in the first half instead of 12, and that's a big difference. 12-0. Iowa gets the ball, drives. Jonathan Kim, as great as he was, he said he was kicking it too low because he was a kickoff specialist at North Carolina. That's what he does by trade to begin with. But today could not reach the end zone. I think he had one touchback. Could not reach the end zone. I put in the pre-snap read, special teams, Iowa has a good return game. They had it last year. They've got it this year. And Iowa was getting good field position to start, including the beginning of the second half, only had to go 58 yards to score. 12-7, Michigan State's got the ball back. The tenor of the game has changed in one drive, 12-7. Michigan State goes ahead, and they get a couple of third and short conversions on their ensuing drive. Third and two at the 44-yard line. That's when Aiden Childs had that design keeper. Think about that. You got a design keeper on 3rd and 2. It gives you a +1 when the quarterback's keeping it in that situation. And he cuts it back the other way and ends up, running around, gets that 21-yard run, making people miss and so forth. But Michigan State is becoming a team tonight that was hard to stop on 3rd and 2. Later on in that drive, 3rd and 1, 21-yard line, short side toss to K'Ron Lynch-Adams, picks up 3 yards rather easily. Then they go straight to the end zone, off coverage, post, corner. And the way he ran that route, Montori Foster, it's selling to the inside and bodying into him in order to get more leverage to the outside, and Childs hits him. Rico and I were talking about that. It's the old Bill Walsh theory. A lot of times it's easier to throw a touchdown pass from 20 yards out than it is from 10 yards out because the field hasn't shrunk. You have more room. Took smartly, West Coast offensive personnel at Michigan State taking a shot at the end zone from the 20-yard line. After some red zone problems in the first half, 19-7 had some breathing room. But Iowa came back and Michigan State came back. Back and forth, and Michigan State outlasted them. Very impressive.
One thing I want to mention about Jonathan Kim is, the impressive thing is the 55-yarder, sort of in the fourth quarter that he hit. He misses a 55-yarder in the first half. I get that, but the one in the first half is going with the wind at his back. This one was into the wind, and he didn't feel based on what they were talking about pregame that he was even going to get the ball or get a chance to kick that 55-yarder, going into the wind. But he does a nice job on that and sets a school record tonight. But I feel so good for him from the aspect of here's a guy that lost 2 kicking competitions when he was at North Carolina. Played the role of kickoff specialist, as well as anyone in the country, but wanted to work for something else and kept on working at it, changed his mechanics, changed on what he does. And he's been awesome for Michigan State since he came here. It's like one of the – and, we can talk about, well, he had all this background as a kicker. Of course he's going to be good. No, I mean, Michigan State took him on a recommendation of his former kicking coach, Dan Warner. But I'm telling you what, for this guy to miss out on that when he's at North Carolina, to come here and do what he's done, and to do it as calmly, it's pretty dang impressive. 55 yards into the wind isn't easy. This is a hard stadium to kick in. And Michigan State, whereas they lost that special teams battle last year, obviously the punt return that really killed Michigan State at Iowa. This year, special teams was a huge part of it, just like offense, just like defense. It was a 3-phase game for Michigan State. And I think that's the exciting part, is that all 3 phases came through. None of them were perfect, but they all came through.
Yeah, didn't have to punt, so the Iowa punt return didn't come into account on this. Michigan State with the defense, they disguised some things well. Also, McNamara said after the game that the first third down of the game, Iowa's first possession, Michigan State showed them something that they hadn't seen on film, which is an interesting little psychological thing for Michigan State to do it, not save it for the second half, show it early and make them think, how many other weird things am I going to see throughout the course of the game? And what it was, and I tweeted this out, that it wasn't a pick your poison type situation. Not only that, they ran kind of a blitz on that. I thought that Rossi would save his blitzes for the second half, because that's what he did last year when Minnesota beat Iowa. But this time they went with 0 safeties on 3rd and 7, third play of the game. And Jordan Hall's on the edge, and he drops back into coverage, and they pick up a bracket who they knew would be Iowa's primary. Took it away. I think he ended up throwing it out of bounds or whatever. But McNamara said after the game, he was asked, did they show anything new? And he said early in the game, that one was. And Nakai Martinez with his interception later in the game, Martinez thought that they had baited McNamara into thinking that it was man-to-man. And at the snap, Martinez gets deep into, I think it was cover 4, so he had one of the deep lanes, got over the top, sailed on him, interception. So Michigan State, with some of the disguises, Rossi's pretty good at this stuff. Jonathan Smith talked about it in the spring and in preseason. Smith being an offensive coach, looking at the offense and so forth. Man, Rossi does a good job against us disguising things. He helps us. He works us pretty hard. Smith was impressed with what Rossi did in practice in the spring and in August. Today we saw some of those change-ups without, operating live without a net. Nothing Joe Lee done, risk gamble stuff, and changed the look on it, kept things bottled up. The 175-yarder, you and I just talked about that, or you mentioned it to me during the TV timeout, because Michigan State had been doing more like single safety deep, extra man in the box. You're like, does that mean, now you're saying, man, now you can go back to 2 deep? And I said, yeah, they had been doing a little bit more zone coverage. And it was a cover 4. It was theoretically a safer play to not give up a big explosive play. The 2 safeties were deep to begin with, and Malik Spencer's in there creeping in a little bit, and he got sucked in too close for the inside run and was not able to get over the top to stop that thing as it got out. In retrospect, they'll probably say situational football. Right now, we're up 2 scores, fourth quarter. Getting in the box and stopping a run to 3 yards or less is not as important as staying back and making sure a 75-yarder gets out. So I think that's a learning experience. They were in a defense that should have protected against that. Got a little overzealous on that and just missed it by a hair. Got it caught in the wash a little bit. So that'll be it. But Iowa's good enough that if you make a little mistake like that, that cat can go, and that's what happened on that one.
Yeah, he got out for a big one against Ohio State as well. I mean, he's a real legit running back. He's got a good, they do a really nice job, and he is tough to bring down. And one thing I want to mention is you're talking about Joe Rossi and like some of the wrinkles. We were talking about defensive backs coach, a secondary coach, Blue Adams, the other day, and he was talking about Rossi being the mad scientist, where he puts in a lot of things that are a challenge for you as a defensive backs coach because it changes from week to week. He's always got something cooking up for each team that they play, and the challenge is to communicate that effectively to your guys. And I know it's difficult at times because you're switching coverages and stuff like that. And but it's effective against a team like this, where probably there's less risk of having too many moving pieces. There's more of a reward. There's a better risk reward in your favor.
Sure. One more thing about the offensive line. I'm not ready to say they've arrived yet. There's one aspect of this game that's a little bit different, and that's that Iowa is more of a two-gapping team. They get into you and try to move you and then disengage. If you're playing a one-gapping team, which is what they did against Baldwin on the tackle for loss. Remember that one play when all of a sudden they had three guys in the backfield? Well, Michigan State was running duo, so they had a double team here and a double team there. Baldwin was the one guy that was by himself. I think he's going against Adams, or what's his name, 95? I don't know. But anyway, good defensive tackle. And instead of two-gapping on that play, he ran a change-up and one-gapped him with a shoulder club and an arm over and penetrated. And that, if you're going against two-gapping all day, you're susceptible to getting beat by the change of speeds there. That's just the way. And Iowa can catch you with that once in a while. But with the way Iowa is two-gapping all the time, that, they just try to win physically and knock you back and let their linebackers roam. We're not getting that done today. But if Michigan State is going against a two-gapping team, that doesn't really task their weakness, which is when they run zones, they've had trouble giving up one-gap penetration where they're just not quick enough getting a reach block, and they're allowing people to slant and cross their face and get that negative play penetration that we saw throughout the first half of the season. That might not be fixed yet just because of the way Iowa plays. That part of it didn't get tested a whole lot. So I'm not ready to say the offensive line is ready to operate zone blocking against everybody because Iowa's different. It's usually very good, but Michigan State's offensive weakness has been closing the daylight on some of those wide zones, and even mostly wide zones. And that's where that penetration has come up this year. So I'm not going to say that's solved yet. And they're not always going to be this fresh as they were coming off a bye week, so there's more to prove. But going on the road at Michigan, this game looks a lot different than it did 12 months ago. 12 months ago, Michigan State was in shambles. The program was embarrassed by what was going on. Harlan Barnett was just trying to keep the program together. Michigan was rolling with all the stuff they had going on. And, where that program is now with Michigan losing to Illinois and looking listless, and Michigan State now getting this as a big booster going into Ann Arbor. If you just said in August that Michigan State is going to have a quality chance to win this game, no one would have really thought that'd be the case. Michigan was preseason top 10. Michigan State was picked to come in 17th out of 18 in the Big Ten. But college football happens, and Michigan State's going to go down there expecting to win. A lot of people are going to pick them to win. Maybe not everybody. More people will pick Michigan. But if you're Michigan right now, I think you're a little nervous, aren't you?
I think so because you look at what Michigan State has done in terms of like their secondary play has been really good this year. In terms of like their pass defense and the run defense as well. And it's like Michigan State does a nice job of like the way Michigan plays football. I mean, if you watch them today, they have a really hard time chunking plays down the field. A lot of it is short gains. A lot of it is 10, 12-play drives if they get a chance, and they're also mistake-prone. I think their offensive line, from what I watched today, reminded me of what Michigan State's offensive line looked like at Boston College or against Ohio State, where like some good play, but quite a few mistakes, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on Michigan in this game. And Michigan State, they're feeling good about themselves. I know what you're saying, going back to the Michigan State O-line about the two-gapping and one-gapping thing, but I'm a firm believer in like the psychological side of it. Michigan State's offensive line needed a boost. They needed something to feel good about themselves, something that they could hang their hats on, something that they could point to that said, "Hey, this is real progress." Rolling up 212 rushing yards on Iowa is progress. It's good. It's good all the way around, and they're going to feel good about themselves. And I think it's going to be easier for them to go to work, take those hard corrections that they'll get from from O-line coach. He's outstanding, but
Mahalchik,
and it's going to be a good week of work for those guys because there's enough to correct. They're not going to feel like they've arrived, but they needed to feel good about themselves. They can feel good, and everybody contributed. I think, Michigan State, I'm not going to say they're going to have a low-pressure game. They're going to come in there wanting to win, but they're not going to get dominated physically by Michigan. And that hasn't been, the case the last couple of times. And this is going to be, Michigan better be ready to play. And if Michigan State plays, limits their mistakes, is able to play without making too many mistakes or making dumb mistakes on defense by being too amped up, I think they're going to do a good job. The biggest thing to me I wonder about with Michigan is, can Michigan State keep the tight end Colton Loveland in check? If you can take him out of the game just somewhat, there's really not receivers that scare you that they've got. And, it just feels like Michigan is not the same threat that they've been in years past because the skill level to hit you over the top, it's not scary. It's not like Oregon. It's not like Ohio State. And if Michigan State can play like they did today and they can build on that and they can be physical, I think good things can happen for them down in Ann Arbor. And I'm excited to see what Aiden Childs does on the road there. He's already had several road games. He's already experienced a lot of the emotional highs and lows and the travel and all that stuff. And I do think there's some value in having that bye week and saying, even though it sounds cheesy, cliche, hey, we're 0-0. But it did seem like a clean break from the first half of the season to the second half of the season. And I think psychologically, whatever Jonathan Smith said to his team about the bye week, like winning the bye week, we heard that. And it still sounds ridiculous to me, hey, we won the bye week. But there's some real buy-in and belief there.
Created a mindset.
It did. And these guys feel like, hey, we're 1-0 moving forward. And I do think sometimes you need to segment your season. And I think Michigan State could point to this game and say, hey, we're building towards something at the end of the year. We want to be playing our best football at the end of the year. This is a good step in the right direction for these guys, and we'll see if they can keep it going next week.
Yeah, and winning the bye week, it's a psychological reset. It means even though we're telling you guys to get away from football a little bit, we're still a team. We're winning the bye week together, and that was effective. And I wonder about after they played Oregon, like you said, got back late Saturday, whatever time, took Saturday off, took Sunday off, took Monday off, Tuesday, came back Wednesday. Not only did they practice, had a lot of ones versus ones physical, then took Thursday and Friday off, I think. Thursday, maybe Friday, and started the Iowa prep one day early on Saturday. So just that one day of Wednesday. I don't know if that's a Jonathan Smith thing or a Chris Peterson thing at Boise State and Washington. I don't know, but it worked pretty well. As far as Michigan goes, I'm not close to that program. I don't know. But one of their challenges, if they're like most teams, is whether their culture can hang together. Are they going to start pointing fingers? Can they handle being around each other when they're losing? So that's going to be
started hitting the portal. It's all those kind of things. Michigan State went through that in 2016. They went to the playoff. They had a whole bunch of NFL guys on that team. People thought they were going to do well moving forward because they had a highly ranked recruiting class. And that thing
no leaders in 2016.
Yeah,
I don't know what the leadership situation is there, but they've got challenges now.
Right. So we'll see what happens. But I do like where Michigan State is mentally. I think physically, they measured up tonight. And
they're going to be so eager to play that game. Montori Foster said he's looking forward to playing this game. He was measured with it, but there's 61 new players on the team, but they'll be told by some of these other guys what's at stake with this one. Even Jonathan Smith doesn't know what this rivalry is about. He'll turn it over to other people, Maverick Hansen, Courtney Hawkins, Demetrius Martin. Some of those people will come to the forefront this week.
And I think even a guy like Jordan Turner, who's never played in it, was at Wisconsin, but he's a Michigan kid. Nick Marsh, he knows this because it's like he's in the state. It's going to be different now, but it's going to be fun. There's a lot of guys on this team that, Cal Halliday, guys that have been around for a long time, that this means a lot to them. And this is one of those things where I think at this time of year, you got a little bit of momentum. This is a chance to even galvanize the team further, with the game against your rival. And then really, if they can go in there and they can do some of the things they did today, then really you are building towards the end of the season. And then Michigan State's ahead of schedule. But I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves with that. They've got a lot of work to do this week, but I think they've experienced a lot this season, and they've grown a lot. We saw a lot of growth today, and it's such a good thing to see and to win. You can talk about winning the bye week all you want, but if you don't win the game after winning the bye week, then all that stuff sounds stupid. Then it becomes a point of ridicule.
established the run with 212 yards rushing. It's not like they had a big 50 or 60 yarder to pad it. They were chunks of 5 yards, 8 yards, 15 yards, 5 yards, 8 yards, 15 yards. Aiden Childs had the longest run today, so they rolled up 212 without like a misleading 60 yarder.
They didn't have a ton of negative yards. I mean, that's the thing that hurt them in the past.
Absolutely.
There's times where they picked up short yardage, it was great, but then you got like
You never had a 2nd and 12.
you're
Not
getting
very
5
often.
yards, 6 yards, 8 yards, and then all of a sudden minus 12, and that's what kills you. But this today, there's like only a handful of examples of negative runs.
First down runs, yeah. So they established the run, they stopped the run, and Aiden Childs passed a lot of tests. They grew as a team. They've been dangerous all year, but haven't had all their crap together. Today they had a lot of that crap together, and the danger caught fire, and it was pretty interesting to watch. Anything else, Paul?
I'm just eager to see what happens coming forward. You know, I think of like Connor Cook as a first-year starter, that Iowa game, and now he won down in Iowa City, and that was a good Iowa team, and they really kind of built from that. I'm not saying that this is a situation like that, but I think when you win against a team that has good fundamentals, solid character, and just good DNA, that can really propel a team forward. And I'm wondering if that's the same thing for Michigan State. I even think other times during the D'Antonio era when they beat good, hard-working Iowa teams. And I do think you can get a lot of growth from that.
Beating Iowa, a veteran Iowa team. So Michigan State's 4-3, but a good-looking 4-3 now with a chance to get to 5-3. And of the 3 losses, they lost to Oregon and Ohio State. I mean, I don't know. They weren't great before. They're not great now, but a huge step forward for Michigan State. Now can they take another step, beat Michigan, get to 5-3? We'll be covering that all week. It's going to be interesting to watch. Big week for Michigan State football. Paul and I and the rest of the SpartanMag.com gang will be covering that at SpartanMag.com. Join us over there. You'll have a lot of fun. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. You've been watching the VCast from Spartan Stadium with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.